Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Jack Westin MCAT podcast with your hosts, Molly. And of course, for our Cars Reading Skills workshop today, we are joined by Jack Westin himself. Jack, super excited to have you back for another one of these. I think students are really liking them.
Yeah, it's so much fun doing it. So, yeah, excited to go into the next one.
Yeah, so in case you have not joined us for one of these workshops before, we will be going through one of our CARS daily passages. This is the passage from May 19th. It's titled Animal Language. These passages are posted every single day to our homepage. You can actually access this one on our homepage or in the link that's in the description. We encourage you to give the passage a try before listening if you can, because what we're doing is we're going to go through this passage sentence by sentence and really help you identify what key information from this passage is ultimately going to be critical for your understanding of the concepts and arguments, and of course, your understanding of the questions later on. As you guys know, cars, every passage is completely different. And so every time we do one of these car skills workshops, we go over a slightly different type of passage. Jack, what do you think is unique about this passage, or what should students be getting out of this experience here?
Yeah, this passage is going to highlight how different cars is from every other section and every other class you've ever taken. Most classes, you are taught things that are fact-based, meaning, hey, this is how science is. You got to learn it, you got to study it, don't question us, right?
Yeah.
Cars is very subjective in terms of the ideas they present. There isn't necessarily like these ideas are not necessarily correct or incorrect. They're just
Mhm.
ideas. And so I think the hard part is knowing that although an idea is stated, the author may not defend that idea. The author may go against the idea that they state. And you may think, why? Why would the author present an argument or an idea that they would later not defend or actually go against? And that's because Carr's passages are more conversational, right? They're not sciencey, they're not research based where they just give you give you some idea and expect you to just memorize it and remember it. It's subjective, right? In terms of what we want to believe in terms of these ideas. Now, you have to know the ideas, right? You have to understand the ideas. That doesn't mean that you should ignore them, but you have to be more malleable in terms of your ability to understand and agree with these ideas.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how this passage plays out, so we can see kind of exactly what you're talking about here. So let's go ahead and dive in with paragraph number one. Again, we're going sentence by sentence. Okay, so we're looking at the first sentence of the passage. This sentence says, an explicit discussion of the relation between human language and animal communication systems appears in a recent discussion by W.H. Thorpe. Okay. So it's the first sentence of the passage. And Jack, I know you always say, make sure you understand that first sentence. To me, I'm seeing this and we're kind of setting our stage. Not really a super strong argument, but we're basically saying this guy Thorpe or this person Thorpe discussed human language and animal communication systems.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's just establishing the topic, right? So we now know this whole passage is probably going to talk about human language and how it relates, the relationship between human language and animal communication. We don't know
Mhm.
what that relationship is, but we're about to discuss it. And so we need to prime ourselves for that discussion.
Yes, I love that. We didn't really get anything super intense from this sentence, but we do get a lot in terms of setting the stage. That's awesome. Okay, let's take a look at our second sentence. It says Thorpe argues that the characteristic properties of human language can be found in animal communication systems, although, quote, we cannot at the moment say definitely that they are all present in one particular animal, end quote. So now we've got a direct quote from Thorpe. Now we actually do learn what Thorpe thinks, right? So it sounds like we're saying human language is somewhat similar to animal communications, but it doesn't seem like they can be identical. One animal can't have all of these characteristics.
Yeah, I mean that's really it. Just knowing that this is Thorpe's idea, right? This isn't the
Mhm.
author's idea. The author is presenting someone else's opinion, right? And
Mhm.
so knowing that there are some properties of human language that can be, related or can found in animal communication, not perfectly, like no animal perfectly has it all, but knowing that there is some sort of relationship, which we kind of anticipated, right, in the first sentence of this paragraph, you
Mhm.
just got more information from this, right? Specifically what it is, right? Characteristic properties. And Thorpe is saying this. Okay, that's really it. I mean, it's just a pretty straightforward paragraph, pretty easy to read.
Yeah. And for anyone that's just listening along, that was the entirety of paragraph one. So, not the most complicated. We're really just discussing Thorpe's argument here about animal and human communication. Okay, well, let's make our way into paragraph number two. We see Thorpe cites as an example the song of the European robin, in which the rate of alternation of high and low pitch signals, or high and low pitch signals the intention of the bird to defend its territory. We get a semicolon here, not the longest sentence, but it is nice to treat these as periods. So if we consider this sentence up until the semicolon, it kind of sounds like we're establishing the robin as some, example or illustration of the fact that human and animal communication can be similar, right? Okay, cool. To me, robin has some ability to communicate with others to defend its territory.
Right. And you should visualize and really understand high and low pitch, you know,
Mhm.
thinking about how that could play a role. But yep, sounds good.
Perfect. We'll finish that sentence up. The rest of it says the higher the rate of alternation, the greater the intention to defend the territory. So again, yeah, we're visualizing this. We could almost see the robin. We can almost hear the robin. The robin is communicating to other animals around it this intention, right? I need to defend my territory. So to me, I mean, I'm not a bird expert. I hear this and I'm like, that's kind of cool. It's obviously illustrating animal communication systems, but I love cars passages because you never know what you're going to get into.
Right. We're not, well, now we know how European robins work.
Exactly. That's critical information for living daily life.
Right.
Okay, well, let's finish up this second paragraph. Again, authors using pretty nice, brief little paragraphs. The last sentence says, the example is interesting, but it seems to me to show very clearly the hopelessness of the attempt to relate human language to animal communication. Whoa. All right. There's a lot going on in this sentence. To me, I don't know about you, Jack. This sentence feels like kind of like a mic drop.
Yeah.
Like
I
I'm
want-
thinking of the robin, I'm hearing the robin, and then whoa, this is a big change up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. I mean, it says this example is interesting. So the author is trying to be nice there, right?
Mhm.
But then,
Yeah.
but then there's something here. There's a word here that we really need to pay attention to.
Uh-huh.
All right. And I know you know what that word is, but
Yeah.
I'm wondering if everyone else does. All right. So I'll give you a second, everyone, to figure out what that word is. There's a very important word here. Okay. That word is me. Me.
Yes.
Who's me?
That would be the author.
Right. So finally, this is a treat. This is Christmas coming in
Exactly.
May. Okay. The author is telling us their opinion. Right?
Hmm.
Their opinion is what really matters when we answer these questions. We want to know what the author believes. So the author is saying, but it seems to me, and it doesn't have to say me, it could say I, it could say myself. As long as they are directing the argument to themselves, that's the key
Hmm.
here. Seems to me to show very clearly the hopelessness. Okay, so this is hopeless,
Hmm.
is pathetic, basically,
Yeah.
of the attempt to relate human language to animal communication. So that is a mic drop. That's a complete 180 from Thorpe, right? This
Yes.
is what I was talking about. Like we were originally talking about the relationship, and I was actually starting to believe Thorpe, right?
Hmm.
Like, oh, the European robin alternates, the pitches to defend its territory. Okay, well, maybe that's true. That's great. That's a form of language, right? Like human language. Maybe that's like how it relates to us, right? But
Hmm.
then the author's saying, well, that's nice, like that the robin does that, but that's not human language.
Yeah.
That's not related to human language. Now, I don't know why, right? But I know the author's point here. It's like this is not human language. And
Yeah.
so that's it. I mean, that's all we need to know, but that's powerful. How very,
Mhm.
very powerful here.
Yeah. And the language to hopelessness, like it just doesn't they're not just saying like, oh, it's kind of hard to relate the two. Like it's very clearly hopeless to try this. We get
Right.
the authors, writing themselves in the story here, and the language is very clear, right? Yeah. This second paragraph, we get a lot of information about that author.
Right. Right. Human language is not like animal language. That's what the author's trying to say here.
Yes.
Okay.
Great. Well, let's look at paragraph 3 and see whether we continue on with the robins or most likely whether we continue on with this idea that it's hopeless. Okay, the next sentence, right? The first one of paragraph 3 is an absolute monster in terms of length. There is a semicolon, so we'll break it up there, but even then it's going to be long. So every animal communication system that is known uses one of two basic principles. We get a colon here. I'd just say, okay, cool. We're classifying animal communication. We then see either it consists of a fixed finite number of signals, each associated with a specific range of behavior or emotional state, as it is illustrated in the extensive primate studies that have been carried out by Japanese scientists for the past several years, semicolon, and we're going to see an or that's going to talk about the other principle. Um, this sentence, I think, even the fragment that we've gotten so far is getting a little less clear. We had our like little breath of fresh air with our mic drop in the last paragraph, and now I can tell personally that we're classifying animal communication. I'm hoping that the author's main point just ties back to the fact that this is different from humans.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's pretty much all I'm getting personally.
Yeah. I mean, something about fixed number of signals, each with a
Mhm.
behavior. So if you do a signal, that's a behavior, right?
Mhm.
We already know what the author thinks.
Yeah.
So this is probably setting us up for something that says, okay, well, this is probably wrong, right?
Yeah.
We don't know. We have to keep going, but we can sigh, we have a moment of relief here because we kind of know where the author wants us to go, right? And
Yes.
so we're okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll finish up the sentence. Again, we started off saying that animal communication uses one of two basic principles. We explained one, or it makes use of a fixed finite number of linguistic dimensions, each of which is associated with a particular non linguistic dimension in such a way that a selection of a point along the linguistic dimension determines and signals a certain point along the associated non linguistic dimension. I don't know about you, Jack, but even just reading this out loud, like and running my eyes over the screen, like I glazed over. Like, this language is so much more complicated than anything else that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, this is just talking about animal communication system, just knowing that there's a
Exactly.
fixed one, a non-fixed one. I mean, just I don't think this is that important, but you
Mhm.
never know, and you should still pay attention. But if
Yes.
you're stuck on this, rereading this, you are missing the point.
Yeah.
You're missing the like. I would read this carefully, but if I don't get it 100% and I've tried my best, I'm not panicking. I'm not going to go into a moment of despair and question my life choice of becoming a doctor. Okay. This is
Okay.
fine. Continue. You know enough probably to get a lot of questions right just because you know the author's position.
Hmm.
Okay.
That's very reassuring, I'm sure, to a lot of people that are reading this sentence and getting stuck. So let's keep going and see what we get other than this from paragraph 3. Our next sentence says the latter is the principle realized in Thorpe's birdsong example. Okay, so ladder, when we hear that word, we're thinking the second of the two options. It's still this fixed finite thing, these linguistic dimensions. Cool. I understood Thorpe's birdsong example, so I guess we're basically saying this is consistent with that. But again, I'm kind of on the edge of my seat waiting for the author to bring it back to you can't compare human and animals.
Right.
Okay, let's look. The next sentence, we say animals make certain signals that match their intentions. Okay, that's much clearer, right? I'm still kind of waiting. Do humans do this? Right? What does the author think about this? Um, but okay, signals match their intentions. Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Our last sentence in paragraph 3 says the bird signals its intention to defend a territory by performing a correlated point along the linguistic dimension of pitch alterate or alternation. Okay, Jack, I'm so glad that you clarified when we read that earlier sentence about linguistic dimensions that it's not critical and we shouldn't be feeling that overwhelm and panic. That said, I think probably some students that were able to talk themselves down from that are going to see more about linguistic dimension and panic again and want to reread again. Do you think at this point it's necessary to reread? And if not, why does that not matter?
This goes back to what we talked about in the prior weeks, where if the MCAT really wants you to know something, they'll make it really clear.
Hmm.
And so I think we need to go back to that mentality of, hey, if this is really important, I'll know,
Yeah.
right? And this is not one of those things where like we need to panic over because it's not very clear what they said in the middle with the whole linguistic dimension stuff, right?
Hmm.
And we do kind of understand what's going on. I mean, it seems like the author agrees that signals do match behavior, right?
Hmm.
Like our intention. Like there is some sort of communication happening with animals, right? There is some human, not human communication relation, but animal communication is occurring, right? With primates and with birds.
Birds.
But the author isn't necessarily connecting this with humans.
Hmm.
So that's all we got to know is okay, well, there's some animal communication occurring. Find
Hmm.
that fixed, whatever they said. But like at the end of the day, this isn't deviating. Like this isn't changing our course. It's
Hmm.
like the author did throw a 180 at us in the previous paragraph, and now they're going back and talking about animals. But my suspicion is that in the next paragraph, they're going to try to talk about how this might or might not relate to humans.
Hmm.
So I'm waiting for more.
Yes.
I'm waiting for more. I don't need to panic. I have to be strong, have courage to continue thinking that I'm still on the right track because I haven't seen anything that's out of the ordinary.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, when you get a sentence that clear, this almost feels like an aside. It's giving us context, but it's all going to tie back. It's all going to tie back.
That's all
So,
it does. I mean, these passages are all about tying things back to each other,
mhm,
and they start more broad and then they get more detailed. And so
mhm,
this was kind of, I think what happened in the first part of this passage was the author kind of gave us their overall thought, and then
mhm.
they're breaking. It's sort of like making an essay. Like usually the introduction includes what you're going to talk
Thesis.
about, right?
Yeah.
It includes your thesis, right? And
Hmm.
so this is sort of doing that. It's setting up the stage for the thesis again later on in this passage.
Hmm.
So we have to just anticipate that that's the structure. If you do enough of these, you're going to start noticing a trend, right? And how they bring up information and how they reintroduce it to just, talk about what their point or their side.
Hmm. I like that mental framework. Okay, let's take a look at our fourth paragraph and we'll see if this ties back. It says a communication system of the second type has an indefinitely large range of potential signals, as does human language. Look at that. Here we go. Now we're talking humans. So, okay, we talked about how, animals can match their signals to their intentions. Sounds like there's a lot of options for how they can do this. And humans also have a lot of options.
Yeah,
So,
it's sort of relating it to the animals, right? A communication system of the second type, which animals have, right?
exactly.
Sort of has the the human language components, right? And
Hmm.
so I'm expecting the author to immediately turn this down.
Yep.
Right. And so that's what I'm anticipating because I know in the second paragraph the author really doesn't like this idea. But let's keep going. Let's see.
Yeah. It says the mechanism and principle, however, are entirely different from those employed by human language to express indefinitely many new thoughts, intentions, feelings, and so on. You got it right on the money, Jack. Right. they said so clearly, it seems to me that it's hopeless to relate the two. That's so clear when you hear actually they're similar, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? Like you're waiting for it to come back and here it is, right? So they are different. The mechanism and the principle are entirely different. So yeah, going back to kind of that paragraph two idea.
Yeah, and this is what confuses students is this is gray. This is like it's
Mhm.
not perfect. Like I know what we want to find is like this black and white where like is it related or is it not related, right? And so the author is trying to help you understand it more in a more detailed way, in a more specific, nuanced way, which will be tested on the questions, right? Which is yes, from the outside, it looks like humans and animals use this sort of indefinitely large range of signals, right, to make their intentions, right? I don't like in terms of the bird, it's sort of like the whole um, way of like just what do they say specifically here? It's
The
something about
the
defending
pitch
territory.
and the
Yeah,
yeah.
through alternating sick pitches, right? Like high and low.
Yeah.
And so the author is saying, okay, well, humans sort of have an indefinite large range of signals as well, as well. But where the author deviates from Thorpe is that their mechanism and principle are completely different. That's the key, right? That they're not really, it's not really the same because their principle, their mechanism is completely different, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand that subtle distinction, which will play a big role in the questions most likely, right? That's how the MCAT works. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see if they shed light on what they mean by this mechanism and principle. The next sentence of paragraph four here says, it is not correct to speak of a quote deficiency end quote of the animal system in terms of range of potential signals. And we see a semicolon here. So what we're saying is animals aren't deficient, right? And maybe this is, kind of tying back to the author saying these animal communication and human language are very, very different, but maybe it's not like animals are worse or are like unintelligent or whatever. They're not deficient necessarily. I'm waiting for them to clarify, but this is incorrect to think of them as deficient.
Right.
Okay, so let's see what comes after the semicolon so we can kind of finish this thought up. It says, rather the opposite, since the animal system admits in principle of continuous variation along the linguistic dimension, parentheses, insofar as it makes sense to speak of, quote, continuity, end quote, in such a case, that's the end of the parentheses, whereas human language is discrete. Okay, so this second piece is a lot more complicated, right? But again, we started to say it's not correct to think of animals as deficient. And then we see rather the opposite. Rather the opposite. They're not deficient, right? They have their own strengths, maybe, right? If it's the opposite is true. Um, Human language is discrete. Not exactly sure what you mean by that, author, but that's one thing that I'm going to look for when I'm reading the next sentence. Yes,
Right.
animals are not deficient, but what do you mean that human language is discrete?
Right. Okay. Let's keep going. Let's finish it off.
Yeah, one last sentence of this paragraph. It says animals can make sounds in ranges that humans cannot. Okay.
Which is showing that they're not deficient, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
so the key here, and I think this is what separates high scoring students from non-high scoring students, like students who score like 129 and above and
Hmm.
score lower than that, right? Like,
Hmm.
under 125, is their ability to comprehend what the author's trying to get at. This is a very difficult concept to understand. Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, you have to be very careful and deep. This is deep. Okay. So in the first paragraph of this passage, the author made it clear that Thorpe believes that human language and animal language are similar and that no animal has all of it. So that actually assumes a deficiency, right? And so in this paragraph, the author's saying, no, they are not deficient. because it's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same. So you can't say they're deficient because there's no similarity. They're totally different things, right? So the author is saying, look, the author is using deficiency as a way, the lack of deficiency, there is no deficiency, to make their argument more profound, to make it more believable, right? Hey, it's not deficient. It's not like they're lacking anything. It's just totally different. And
Mm-hmm.
so do we need to understand that part? It depends. I think the bigger part to understand is that it's different, and that yes, they do have their own language system, but and it's not similar to ours in the sense of how it works, but they do communicate in that way, right? And I think if you understand that big theme, then you're good.
Yeah, love that. Okay, well, let's take a look at paragraph number 5 and let's see how we kind of continue to make this same claim. We say, hence, the issue is not one of more, quote, or less, quote, but rather of an entirely different principle of organization. Cool. That's basically exactly what you just said, Jack, right?
Yeah,
It's
amazing.
not more or less, it's different.
Yeah,
Awesome. Um, okay, this is a pretty long sentence coming up here. It says, when I make some arbitrary statement in a human language, say that, quote, the rise of supranational corporations poses new dangers for human freedom, end quote. I'm not selecting a point along some linguistic dimension that signals a corresponding point along an associated non-linguistic dimension, nor am I selecting a signal from a finite behavioral repertoire, innate or learned. Again, I think, especially because this is coming up again and again, this idea of this linguistic dimension and non-linguistic dimensions and behavioral repertoires, I know just from teaching cars for so long, like you do, Jack, that students are still panicking. This same term has come up multiple times, but it's still, to me, no clearer than it was the first time.
right, right. And we got what we needed from that first sentence of this paragraph. So we should,
Exactly. Yeah. So let's see. I'm hoping that the last sentence here of paragraph 5 ties us back. Let's take a look. It says, I am creating signals using increasingly abstract language for increasingly abstract thought, unlike what animals can do. This sentence is such a beautiful gift, especially for the students that were so overwhelmed by the sentence that came immediately before. This is so much more clear, right? Humans are more abstract, basically. And
yeah.
that's a difference.
Anything here that's really important, that's really like what word here is super, super important to focus on?
I mean, we get I again.
Yeah, the author. Anytime the author is saying something, I want to pay attention. I mean, I'm always paying attention, but I really want to pay attention, right?
Hmm.
I am creating signals that are that use abstract language, right?
Hmm.
Unlike what animals can't do this abstract language stuff,
Yes.
right? And so that's what differentiates us is this
Mhm.
abstract play on language. Okay.
Yeah. I like that you point that out because that's kind of the first concrete thing that we can do that they can't, as far as what we've said.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. If we didn't understand any of the middle stuff, like the third
Mhm.
paragraph or fourth paragraph, we could have literally just ignored those paragraphs because this what is this? One, two, three, fifth paragraph is summarizing everything we need to know.
Hmm.
But we don't know until we read it. So we can't assume, oh, let's just skip the first the middle of the passage. We don't know, right? But
Yeah.
it also tells us that we should be confident that if the MCAT cares about it, they'll make it clear.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, let's finish up last paragraph. So number 6 here it says, furthermore, it is wrong to think of human use of language as characteristically informative in fact or in intention. Okay, so human language is not informative. Maybe that's where we're going.
Yeah.
It's wrong,
Kind of
but
kind of confusing.
mhm,
but let's keep going and see where the author goes with this. Whenever I see the author speak their mind, I'm not letting that go, and I know the author is not going to change their opinion that quickly.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going to assume that this is in relation to what the author has already said.
Yeah. Especially with furthermore. It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
yes, that's true. And this is also true. It's like, probably the author agrees with this based on that transition word.
Right. And the only thing the author is trying to point out here, sometimes the language isn't as direct or as informative or intentional.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe because it's abstract. Well, let's see. Let's see
Yeah.
how it relates. So, human language can be used to inform or mislead, to clarify one's own thoughts, or display one's cleverness, or simply for play. So, lots of ways to use language, not all of which are sharing information.
Right. And the author is trying to basically say, look, with birds, it's you make a signal and that means something. With
Hmm.
humans, we all know this, but like, you could say something, it doesn't necessarily mean what you wanted to say, and you could
Uh-huh.
manipulate people and mislead people. And it's
Mhm.
this is the author's way of saying it's abstract.
Yeah.
It's complicated. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, let's see. If I speak with no concern for modifying your behavior or thoughts, I am not using language any less than if I say exactly the same things with such intention. So I could speak however I want to, basically. You can use language however you want to use it,
And it's still language,
and
right?
it's still language.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Oh my gosh, we're at the last sentence already. This one went by fast. Human language is too abstract to be tied down to simple intentions. Beautiful. That's a pretty nice mic drop itself as well.
Isn't that great? Like the whole paragraph was hard, but then at the end they kind of gave you a reward.
Yes.
Like they summarized it. They made it clear.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's consistent with the previous paragraph. It's really not
Yes.
that different. They're just expanding on what they already talked about.
Exactly.
So what's the main idea here? Like what should we know?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we definitely talked at length about how human and animal communication is different. We know that that's the author's belief. It seems to the author that that's the case. And then we kind of get this element that the way they're different is because humans are more abstract, right? So they're different because humans use language differently. They're organized differently because they are abstract.
Exactly. So if knowing that they're different could probably help you get, I don't know, 3 out of 6 questions right. But
Hmm.
knowing why they're different, the fact that humans use language in an abstract way, right?
Hmm.
That's the difference between a 125 and a 129,
Yes.
right? Knowing that is going to get you above, the 80 percentile, right?
Hmm.
And get you to the top 80 to 100 percentile,
Hmm.
right? And so you have to be careful with what you read. You have to really try to understand the author's position.
Hmm.
That's, I think, really important. And next week's passage, um, I'm excited because that one's really boring, right? And and it's harder, and this is the truth, it's harder to find these ideas and understand them when they're more boring. It's harder to stay focused. So I'm excited about next week's passage as well.
Yeah, me too. And I love that with this, these cars reading skills workshops that we do, that we get to explore so many different types of passages. Um, One of the things that I hear all the time is like, oh, cool. The main idea is always in the first paragraph. I'm going to ignore the rest. Or the main idea is always in the last paragraph. Like students always ask, and Jack, I bet they ask you this too, like, can I just pay attention to the first sentence of each paragraph and ignore the rest? Can I just pay attention to the first paragraph of the passage and ignore the rest? And it's like, no, you have
That's like going into a patient's room and saying, okay, I'm just going to listen to the first thing they say and the last thing they say, and then I'm
exactly.
gonna prescribe medication based on the first and last. You never know.
Yeah.
You never. They may talk and talk and talk, and then eventually they say something that catches your ears, and you'll realize, okay, they have this or that because or at least they'll ask. It'll make you want to question things more, right? And dig deeper. So
I
the
love that.
the reality is everything matters. You need to
Hmm.
pay attention to all of it,
Hmm.
but not all of it is equally important,
I
right?
love that.
That's it.
That's awesome. That's your mic drop for today. I heard your opinion in there, Jack.
I gotta use some European Robin, language too there. High and low pitches to get across.
Defending your territory on the importance of cars.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Well, this has been such a fun passage, and I'm also excited about how different next episode's passage is going to be. So if you can, definitely tune in for our next Cars Reading Skills workshop. We're going to be doing the passage from the 26th, titled Colonial Revolutions. So very different from animal communication. So thank you for listening, you guys, and we'll catch you in the next one.